Hi, I'm Barbara Mccarren. I'm here with Judd Fine, and we're in Venice Beach, California in our studio. Judd and I first met in 1984, and we got together in 1986. We got married in 1993 and started collaborating on public projects in 1996 on a project in Long Beach, and then started collaborating on studio projects in 2000. And then in 2005, we had a gallery show together in New York, and we've been working together more or less ever since.
In 1993, I was the artist for the Mccarren Gardens in front of the Central Library downtown, and Barbara was the artist for Pershing Square, which is a really elaborate, large plan, and they were both simultaneous with each other. We called ourselves Mr. and Mrs. LA for a while. Another project was the Split Mound in San Francisco. Split Mound was a huge mound that you entered in, and people didn't realize it, but it was a human habitat. So when they were in there walking around, they were in their habitat, the same way animals around the zoo were in their habitats. This project in Long Beach goes back a long ways. It started in about 2004, 2005. It had a culmination with the design approved in 2007. In 2008, there was a huge recession and the real estate market dropped out, and so this was going to be a 40-story residential tower, so they stopped construction on it. It was also a community redevelopment project, so it could lay fallow for a long time since the city owned the land. I thought it would never happen again. In 2017, we get this call and it says, "Are you guys back on this project?" We said yes. We had a finalized plan by 2017 and we began construction and finally completed it April 18th, 2022.
Initial ideas were inspired by something Judd and I had been dealing with for a long time, which was oppositions. Red and green at its most basic. Being complementary colors, Judd and I being very different in many ways, but then also noting that the Pacific Ocean has two main currents, the Kuroshio and the Oyashio, the cold current and the hot current. How those interact in the Pacific, which is the single largest natural entity on Earth, impacts the weather really for the rest of the world. It's the sort of the initiation of how everything goes around if you see it as centered around the Pacific. That, along with the history of Long Beach, the fact that we were working on a residential building and that it's the largest commercial port in the United States, the commercial versus residential, the whole thing presented as binary to us. The fact that people would be sleeping there and that people would be working there, the idea of the sun and the moon, the idea of industry and leisure, the vertical elements, the horizontal elements, nature versus artifice, with the aquarium below and our sort of replication of some of the creatures above. Also, analog and digital come into play as sort of oppositions in everyday life. So we wanted to create an urban linear park that flowed from the land to the ocean. So at one end, of the project are land creatures, and including snakes and frogs, and the other end are ocean creatures. So we will go from land to sea. The kelp and the jellyfish totems are similar but also opposite. The kelp requires being tethered to live, and the jellyfish sort of requires being untethered to survive.
There is a mythic notion that the huge basin of the Pacific Ocean is a huge chunk of molten land that was jet out, exploded out into the sky and became the moon. So there's this relationship between the moon and the Pacific Ocean, and the moon determines tides. One of the things that Barbara just mentioned was this idea of verticality. We have an extremely vertical site in a very narrow, elongated plaza between two buildings. One's 40 stories high and the other's 14 stories high. It's not constrained and pinched, but one needs to acknowledge in the art plan the verticality that surrounds it.
And the rest of the plaza, which we designed with realm landscape architecture, is meant to echo that riparian environment, because the site is also, besides the Pacific Ocean, is bounded on the north by the Los Angeles River and on the south by the San Gabriel River. The grasses were planted to mimic the tidal movement, but also to pick up the wind, and it is quite a windy corridor. And then there are California sycamores that provide a lacy overgrowth in the summer and spring. During the winter, it's bare. So the dappled sort of feeling of being underwater in the summer and bringing coolness to the plaza and using native grasses. And then these beautifully designed benches that sort of echo the flowing of rivers and tide.